And before we get into the episode, I must shout out my lovely hosts, the great folks at Last Man Standing Productions, your home for all your content creation needs, whether it be a photo shoot of your family, a photo shoot of your business, or that smash hit you're working on. You need a music video? Check them out. Last Man Standing Productions, your home for all your content creation needs. You can catch them on Instagram and Facebook. Let's get into the episode. Welcome back to the Fantasy Pavilion, guys. So another international break special and another FPL pundit, another FPL legend. We have had Javed Khan on the last one. And of course, I'm joined by FPLLENS, Gabriel, Just Gabe, right? And we are here to discuss stats, your specialty, Gabe. But before we get into that, what's your pedigree in the FPL and why FPL? Why not NFL? Why not NBA? What drew you to this? And I also saw on your Twitter bio that you are also a holder of a football license. So Gaffer Gabe as well.
That's right. I've coached for more than half my life at this point.
Ooh, wow.
I have a United States Soccer Federation B license, and all of my writing kind of stems from that perspective, from a coach's perspective.
Okay.
My pedigree in FPL is not an illustrative one. It's, I mean, I told this story at Net That Hall that I actually I don't know, it wasn't until this one season where so my highest rank is 14K. The season before that rank, halfway through the season, that's when I learned that that OR existed. I didn't even know that overall rank existed, and I just played very, very casually, and I got in the hundreds of thousands. Since that 14K season, usually about 170K, right around there. I think 190K one year. So I'm not the greatest FPL player, mostly because I'm very impatient and emotional. So that holds me back. But interesting that you ask about other fantasy formats, because I got into fantasy through NFL, and I loved that. I loved NFL fantasy, but I quit everything NFL when the CTE, the concussion study, came out. Where 110 out of 111 athletes were developing a degenerative brain disease.
Yes.
And specifically, it's more so the athletes of color that are put in more dangerous positions, that are built and bred for these positions. And I just couldn't support the sport anymore. And then I turned all my attention to FPL, and I got into writing about FPL really more seriously when I couldn't coach anymore because of the pandemic. And I channeled my coaching energy to my writing.
Okay, solid. So, of course, I usually make a very inaccurate statement, Gabe. I normally say that I don't use stats when picking my teams. That is super inaccurate, because when I say, okay, I compare Vardy, how much goals Vardy would have scored for the last 5 games compared to how much Antonio scored for the last 5 games, that's me using stats, right? But I don't use stats to the extent you do. I don't have metrics. I don't use the XGA. So can you start from very simple in ascending order? We go up the road. How do you implement stats first into the FPL, and then how can the average Joe like myself integrate it as well? So stats for dummies. How do we get involved into? Do I need to bring up your graphics as yet or not yet?
I can talk around it first, and then we'll bring up the graphics as an example. I think first and foremost is to recognize what your strengths are. I'm not a stats person. I studied philosophy in university. I taught social justice and English literature, and I'm a humanities person, not a data scientist, right? But I got into stats because just in watching the games, I'm assuming if you're not into stats, you're more about the eye test. You enjoy watching the game and that experience, right? And your own evaluation. But there's an eye test story to be told through stats. So what I did is I'd watch the games, and then I would scour the stats, just like raw data from Fantasy Football Scout is where I get my data from.
Okay.
And then things would jump out at me, and they were things that I saw in the game represented in the stats. And that's how I started. That's how I got into stats, and that's how I started my writing as well. So I try to tell the eye test story through numbers, in order to have a more, I guess, universal language of kind of math and data and numbers. by which to speak, because we all know eye test can be very subjective.
Yes.
Now, what I like is that interplay, the subjective element that I'm bringing, playing or translating into the more objective numbers. What I would recommend to people is whatever you see on the field, then try to look for that. Like if you see, I don't know, if you see Jared Bowen, for example, which we'll get to, right? If you see him attacking a lot, then go to his stats, look for his stats. You can go Fantasy Football Scout, and we'll get to this as well, has data from specific parts of the field, the left, center, and right. Go see that. Go see his heat maps, for example. See his touch heat map and see his passes received heat maps. I like to compare those two a lot, because the touch heat map is the overall gameplay, whereas the passes received heat map usually means where they're receiving the ball in attacking situations.
Now, I'm glad you brought these things up. So Jared Bowen, great example. He'd have had a great game last game week. Let's say he's coming up against a quote-unquote difficult team. Do you still bank on him and say, no, what, he had a great game last game, despite the opposition? What I'm asking really is that his stats affected by the opposition? Because a lot of guys they will big up a player, and then because the fixture is coming with, they will want to switch or not use them. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes they shine and rise above, depending on the fixture. So is that something that you have to factor in? Or you say, no, they had a great game, the stats is here, let's go with him?
I think that's a question for each individual to kind of assess from the eye test perspective. If you see a player is able to supersede their stats, or if they're extremely clinical, for example, and you want to bet on them against tougher opposition, I think that's fine. And I think on the flip side, you also have to look at a player like with great stats, like Benteke, but he's underperforming the stats, and ask yourself, well, why is a player like Benteke underperforming stats? Well, it's probably because he's not a very good player, and so the underperformance is sustainable, right? And then the other thing I'll say regarding, I mean, you're asking me about like the match of the conceded, right? On the conceded side, and I write FPL matchups, so you know I'm going to bite down hard on this one. I would say don't just look at the opposition, look at details of the opposition. For example, we might think that West Ham is a difficult matchup, right? And I believe Wolves play West Ham this coming weekend, right? West Ham have conceded the joint 5th most chances from the left. So who's playing on the right for Wolves? You want to look at that, right? If Hwang is on the left, and Jimenez is kind of in that front right, inside right channel, could be a good option against what seems like a tough opposition. So I think the piece of advice I would give is, whatever you do not go by the official FDR colors. Look for something a little more sophisticated than that, and get yourself curious about that. Well, why is that not good? Ask yourself these questions.
Exactly. Yeah, I fully agree with that. Okay, so one of my questions that I had here. So now you have a coaching background. So is it safe to assume that you also watch the games, or have you stopped watching the games and you just look at the stats, or do you encompass it too?
I can't stop watching the games. I mean, the whole reason I'm interested in the stats is because I love the game so much. And if that love for the game and watching the game is gone, then probably my interest in the stats will be gone as well. So I watch as many games as I can. I'll wake up. So here where I live, the games, well, right now they start at 5:30, but before the clocks changed, they started at 4:30, and I would be up for that first game. I will watch between 6 to 8 games in a weekend, not including La Liga or Bundesliga matches as well. So everything for me starts with the eye test.
Okay. Yeah. And do you have a team that you back in EPL?
No, I do not. Growing up, I was a Manchester United fan, but it was I grew up in Venezuela, so I had very limited exposure to teams, and Manchester United was one of the only English teams that we had any exposure to. So I liked them, but then I came to my senses, or more better, but I just stuck with one team.
You don't want the people attacking you for that like that. And so obviously you won't be using something that's not working, right? So when you would have initially introduced and brought stats into your FPL strategy. Did you see a direct return? Was there a direct correlation to, okay, this was working, and the players that you picked with it? No, of course, obviously, this is based on, of course, humans as well, because it's all good and well to say, right, Ronaldo is great, put him in, but then something happened mentally or something happened, just as doesn't have a good game, he's crowded out. But have you seen direct relation or to scoring points, FPL returns, and the stats based on the players that you would have, the metric would have given you, or too late to pick?
I think there is a correlation. I don't know if I would call it linear though. I think initially there's a steep increase in FPL production. I think you instantly become a better FPL player if you can understand some basic stats and know how to combine some basic stats. That makes sense. However, I do think then there's a plateau, because then it's the learning curve of stats, and I think that's where I am. I'm getting my mind around how stats work, how certain stats can be combined and others cannot be combined, and so on and so forth. So then it gets really complicated. But I don't think people need to go that far. Only if they have a specific interest, and if it's fun for them, then yeah, go check it out, because it's fun for me, so I did it. But I think after that initial curve, I think stop there. I think the rest might be overthinking it.
Okay. All right, well, let's get into the graphics that you have prepped here, and while we go into, if you could, any tools that, as I said, any basic tools that people could incorporate immediately. So what I'm looking at, gaming 12 is coming up. What's something that they could use immediately, and then something maybe for gaming 12, 13, and 15, 3 matches ahead, that kind of thing, right? So we bring it to.
Yeah, so what we're going to examine here is the zonal matchups FDR. This was a metric that FPL Mariner devised. He built this based on my FPL matchups articles. So he kind of took that idea of looking at zonal matchups. And one thing I'll say is that this FDR and in the articles, it's about chances created and conceded in the left, right, and center of the field. Those are the stats that we're looking at. Those stats are, usually unreliable. They're just small chances. What we would love to get, but nobody has this kind of data, is XG from these areas of the field. And then we can kind of create a bigger picture around it. But we're basically, the higher the number, the better. And you can see this is posted on the Net That Hall YouTube channel as well. You can always access it. So in this slide, obviously there's Reece James that's highlighted. And the reason Reece James is highlighted, if we look at Chelsea's zonal FDR against against away to Leicester, Chelsea has 3.5 from the left, 3.9 from the center, and 4.4 from the right. What this means is basically what FPL Mariner did. He did chances created versus chances conceded. So that's what the matchup is on each one. And these are basically the expected chances. Oh, sorry about that. These are the expected chances, like how many chances you expect them to get from that side of the field. And we see Chelsea from the right side is at 4.4 against Leicester. And then you examine that. The next step in the analysis would be why. Right. Why is it going to be more from the right? And then you think, well, Leicester, they played Luke Thomas for a while at left back when Ricardo Pereira went down, and then Timothy Castagne went to the right side, and the young Luke Thomas played on the left. And Leicester conceded a lot of chances back then. So then you have to question the stats. That's how you question the stats. Like, well, is it really as good as we think? Maybe it's about the same as the center or the left, if you take out Luke Thomas, that Luke Thomas factor, right? So I would use stats not to provide answers, but to ask questions, I think is the lesson.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Would you like me to maybe highlight a couple other ones here?
Yeah. Highlight a few. So, go ahead. I wouldn't call it any. You go ahead.
I'll call some out here. I mean, the one that we're all looking at, of course, is Liverpool. Liverpool against Arsenal.
I didn't want to prompt it because as you may not know, but I'm an Arsenal fan, a big Arsenal fan. Right?
I do know that, of course. Of course. Yes. So that's why we're going to go straight there. And I'd be curious to hear if you're going to captain Salah against your team. I know my co-host at Net That Hall, co-host, FPL Nima, he's also a big Arsenal fan, and he's thinking he might not captain Salah, but we'll see. But the reason, if you ask yourself, okay, Liverpool against Arsenal, their attack is 4.1 on the left, 3.8 down the center, and 5.0 on the right. And so you have to ask yourself, the 5.0 on the right, is it because Tierney's down?
Right, so Tavares, right.
Yeah, and Tavares loves to attack. He's a little bit impetuous, right? Sometimes he could be a little bit irresponsible, but as an Arsenal fan, I'm sure that it's exciting also as well.
Yes.
So is it that factor, or is it just because Salah is just so dominant and there's so many chances being created from Liverpool's right that it's not really a weakness of Arsenal, it's just a strength of Liverpool's, right? So these are the questions that you have to ask yourself. Let's look on the flip side of that, right? Arsenal against Liverpool. This one's kind of interesting because it's 3.4 on the left, 3.8 on the center, and 2.1 on the right. So Saka owners, they might be a little concerned here because this is a bigger deal, and we know that Liverpool they concede. I believe they concede behind Trent Alexander-Arnold more than
Robertson.
They conceded. They've conceded 36 chances from the right compared to 29 from the center and 22 from the left. So this is really a function of how Arsenal play and not how Liverpool defend, right? Because the most chances are from the center here. So is Aubameyang still an option for people that brought him in? They may be thinking of selling him. Maybe this matchup isn't as difficult as you might think, even though I don't think he's a great asset personally.
No, he's not a great FPL asset. No. Fully agree.
And then the last one I want to mention here is Manchester United against Watford. Left is at a 4.3, center is at a 3.7, and right is at a 3.7. So there are some good matchups across the board, but it's interesting that there are more opportunities coming from that left-hand side. Now, will Ranieri maybe the Ranieri effect hasn't had time to take hold of the stats for this model. Correct. So another thing you have to ask yourself, but also the question I would ask is, well, tactically, how is Manchester United going to set up? When Manchester United set up, when Pogba would actually drift to the left, and he was sent at the beginning of the season where he was getting assists every game. He was playing from the left-hand side during that time. You can see that in the heat maps. If you look to Fantasy Football Scout, look at Pogba's heat maps from the first 3 or 4 game weeks, and you'll see it very much on that left-hand side. Whoever plays on the left, could it be Sancho, for example? Will Sancho maybe get some assists? That could be something you're looking for.
Yeah, solid. So this will be a game week 12 and beyond FDR. Right.
So the ones I just mentioned was game week 12, and then next to it I have game week 12 to 15. But I believe the next slide also has 12 to 15, so I can do the projections all on the next slide.
Sure. Now, give us the title of this again. So this is zonal matchups.
This is the zonal matchups, and we actually just put out a VOD that explains the workings behind it and all of that. It's a recorded VOD on our channel, but it's look for zonal matchups.
Okay. And the metric used here is more or less some of the eye tests, and of course some of the stats in terms of how much chances were conceded and made on each side on each position of the field. Right? Just trying to break it down. Yeah, so as I said, so we're looking at, but these stats would have been because of previous games. So it would have been the wingers. We would have watched Liverpool previous game, looked at the chances created, and of course conceded, and then you come up with this table.
Well, the way the idea for the table started from the eye test, from seeing teams rely heavily on one side or another, or concede heavily on one side or another. Right. After that, the table is only chances created versus chances conceded in each side of the field, in left, right, and center. So this is just the data, and I believe this goes back 6 game weeks, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 8.
Okay.
So The next slide we have here, and we have, as we mentioned earlier, a picture of Jared Bowen there, who's
Right.
been lighting it up recently. Here we're looking at the game weeks 12 through 15 as one block, and then we're looking at game weeks 16 through 18 as another block, and then to the right of that we have the swing. So it says VAR L, VAR left, VAR center, VAR right. What VAR means in this case, it's not the video assisted refereeing that we all hate. This is for variance, and what's interesting about this is it will tell you which way which way it's swinging, if it's getting more difficult or if it's improving.
Okay.
So if we'll start with your team. We'll go right across the board for Arsenal, just to give people an idea. So we have game weeks 12 through 15. Arsenal's FDR from the left is 3.4, from the center is 4.1, and from the right is 2.4. Game week 16 through 18. From the left, it's 3.3, so almost the same. From the center, it's 4.0, which is almost the same, a little lower. And from the right, it's 2.8, slightly up. So we look at the variance. Variance from the left, it went down 0.1. In the center, it stayed exactly the same. And on the right, it went up by 0.4. So when you look at this, you think, okay, well, whoever's playing that center, whoever it's going to be, most likely Aubameyang, right? His FDR, his opponents, the difficulty will stay the same through game week 18. On the left, it'll basically stay the same by, it just goes down by 0.1. And on the right, it improves. So for Saka, it improves by 0.4. So those with Saka, and I mean, there are so many options. That's the problem at that price point right now. But that's kind of how to read that. If we look I want to find maybe something with the biggest swings, right? So if we look at the biggest positive swing, right? Let's look at West Ham, all second from bottom there.
Okay, West Ham, yeah.
So I'll do it a little bit quicker. So in the game weeks 12 to 15, from left, center, right, West Ham are 3.4 from the left, 2.8 from the center, 3.1 from the right. Game weeks 16 through 18, they are 4.1 from the left compared to 3.4. They are 3.2 from the center compared to 2.8, and 4.2 from the right compared to 3.1. So we look at this and we look at the swing, right? The VAR from the left it's getting better by 0.8. So we're looking at Benrahma. Benrahma's opponents are getting better. From the center, it gets better by 0.4. Antonio's get better by about half of Benrahma's. And then look at Jared Bowen from the right. 1.1. It improves after game week 15. His Jared Bowen's FDR improves by 1.1. That's an extra chance a game, and it could mean big dividends in FPL.
Okay, solid. All right, so of course we have to get to the big topic. So you would have recently created your own metric. So of course, before we get into it, explain to us what drove you to this. Why you didn't like our regular XG? What you thought was wrong with it, and what prompted you, or what inspired you to create your own metric? NetXG.
NetXG. So here's what.
And please, slowly.
Slowly, yes. I'll go slowly. So I would look at XG, and it always seemed like such a limited picture it was trying to paint. When you see a game with a certain XG, I feel like that wasn't really giving us any information. Like, what does that mean, right? And so I started in my writing. This was last year. I started combining expected goals, which expected goals is not exactly the probability, but kind of, let's just talk about it that way to keep it simple. The probability of a goal after a certain series of events, given a certain set of conditions, ball placement, angle, defenders in the way, and so on and so forth. Whether the player shooting received the ball on the ground, whether they received it in the air, all of these factors play a role in XG, right? It is a snapshot of the play before the ball is struck.
Correct.
Right? Okay. That's very important to know that about XG. Now, expected goals on target is a snapshot of the expected goals after the ball is struck. Wow. So that got me thinking. And just as a coach, you want to, when you're looking at a game, you see a team set up a play, set up a certain goal scoring opportunity. And that's one thing to evaluate the team on. And then the player, then there's the player's finishing, right? That's another thing to evaluate, the team on. If you want this was in my writing last year, and then I thought about this over the summer, and I finally just kind of devised it recently, is the missing element there is the role of the goalkeeper and how he affects the shot once the shot is taken, right?
Yes.
I'm currently representing that with the expected goals prevented stat. Now, expected goals prevented is basically, it's tied to expected goals on target. So if the expected goals on target is 0.5 and the goalkeeper saves it, the expected goals prevented is positive 0.5.
Yes.
If the player scores it, then the expected goals prevented is negative 0.5.
Negative 0.5.
Right?
Okay.
So that's how those two are linked. Now, so using those three stats, I thought I could take a more complete snapshot of goal scoring opportunities in games. Apologies for that bump. And that's what the metric is. So that the way to read it, way to read the number is almost like an expected goals number.
Right.
But also the way to kind of view the metric is not as it's not anything yet. It's an experiment. Right now, NetXG is a process. It's not a thing. So I'm going to show the experiment, what we're tracking right now, which is at the top left-hand side of the screen there. And at the bottom right, I'm going to show how it has developed. And this is a new metric that's in development, thanks to starting from the NetXG. And I just call it for now experimental NetXG. So looking here at the NetXG, we have the predictions. So I'll take, actually, let's stick. I think if we stick to that same game, it's an interesting one, right? Liverpool is at 1.82 predicted and up. That should be an N, not an M up on the screen there. So apologies for that. But
yes.
They're 1.82 NetXG, and Arsenal is at 1.22. So I estimate the score to be 2-1 in favor of Liverpool. I'm sorry for that prediction, my friend. How are you feeling? First of all, how did what I say make sense? Do you have any questions?
Yes. No. So far, clear as day. Clear. Yeah.
And then secondly, would you like to react to the prediction? Do you want to? I don't know.
No, I'm quite fine. I want to react to what you asked me earlier. If I'm captaining in Salah, we have 4 rules on this channel, Gabe. 4 rules. Always captain Salah. Repeat rule number 1. Always start Trent, and repeat rule number 3. It's as simple as that. Simple as that. Always captain Salah.
I like that 2 and 4 are just reminders.
Just reminders.
Just in case you forgot. Do it. Okay. Fair enough. So the one thing right away. So this is why I do think of NetXG as an experiment, and in putting these metrics together, we'll see the first thing is that NetXG is not predicting any clean sheets.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, that feels like a problem for a metric, right? If it's not predicting any clean sheets, then there's something going on. And thanks to just great people in the community, I've been looking at the effect of using expected goals prevented, how it's a metric that is based on results, where the other ones are metrics that are based on probabilities.
Right. And
combining those apparently is a problem. So that's why I've been adjusting a few things and been going quite deeper. I don't know if this one's sustainable with my resources at the moment, but the experimental one, if we just switch over to the experimental, we can do kind of the same game, and we're at Liverpool 1.5, Arsenal 0.63. That could be a clean sheet for Arsenal. It just depends on how you want to look at it, right? Yeah. Now the difference in the main difference, just to kind of simplify it for the viewers, in the 2 metrics right now, is that the first one, it uses expected goals prevented and takes a conglomerate of the XGs, right? The second one takes each individual shot into account and only uses expected goals prevented to create a goalkeeper metric that it then uses in its calculation. So the second, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say the second one is more granular in that, and this is something. Here's something that blew my mind that I learned recently about XG. Right, say a team has an XG of 0.5 in a match. that XG could be 5 small chances of 0.1. So if somebody has a chance of 0.1, right? That's not a very high chance of scoring, right? Two of them, it's still not high chance. So is it really a 0.5 XG or is it 5.1 XGs?
Right.
And that's why I started to look at each individual shot. Now, to maintain a model like this, I'd have to get XG for each shot for each game.
Yes.
I would need kind of a different situation in life to be able to track that. So we'll see.
I want to make sure I understand. Okay, so because I'm with you so far. Right?
Yeah.
No, because as I said, I watched Net that whole recently because I had to do some homework to prepare for this, and it's been interesting. It's a good watch. But I've always been lost by the numbers. But now that you're breaking it down and explaining, now the experimental graphic, you're saying what you take into account now, or what I think what you will probably have to factor in per shot and per save of that shot as well. And the two keepers that come to mind that have been very consistent for me really would have been Mendy and Ramsey. So, are you factoring? Because as I said, it's very weird and true that you didn't have, like the first one, there was no clean sheet. But considering that Chelsea playing Leicester, now yes, Leicester have not been too hot, but of course, Vardy has been on fire. So you have to factor in his chances as well. You factor in Iheanacho chances as well. So I guess that's why you would have had maybe 2-1 there. But then when you break it down even finer, where Leicester have not been too consistent with the past 2 games, you can give Chelsea the clean sheet in this experimental. Is that no? Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's right. You do expect Leicester to get a few chances, certainly on the counterattack, right? Maybe Vardy against 2 or 3 defenders could be low XG. My dog's barking at someone. It could be low XG. But you could see Vardy potentially scoring that. If he gets something like around 0.34 chances, something like that, Vardy could definitely get one there. That wouldn't surprise you. But it's also maybe not something that you would predict. You would probably back the Chelsea defense.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. All right. So just give us a quick sum up again, just of NetXG again, and then we'll go into the next topic there.
Okay, so right, so NetXG, it's an attempt to make better predictions by kind of obtaining a more complete snapshot of goal scoring opportunities. That's NetXG. New NetXG is an attempt to do the same thing using XG per shot data. And then the same idea, but with a different kind of formula to take care of the issues of expected goals prevented.
Yeah, because when I hear the word net, initially, net to me, I think of total. So now that you're breaking it down for me, as you have the XC, XGT, and XGP is a total of these, and then trying to bring it all into one metric, which I understand. No, it makes a lot of sense actually. I think I will definitely try to. We will talk further on this off screen, but I find now that I understand, I'm very glad I brought you in the show to break it down.
Well, it's you can understand it because honestly, this comes from the eye test.
Yes, exactly. That's why I could have broke down. But I'm watching now where you said, okay, maybe a clean sheet, no clean sheets, but now when you have the final metric here, I said granular, you can understand now why these scores. Because look, these scores increased because I was watching 2-1, 2-1, 2-1 on the first metric, which is not probable all the time. But now that I'm watching the second one, especially against Everton, where you factor in Everton's defense, Everton's injuries, Pickford not too hot, things like that. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And honestly, that's what it is. The Everton one is Pickford and Begovic. Their expected goals prevented is very, very low. It's down there with Kroll. Right. And that's what boosts all season. Their opponents have been boosted by that stat.
Yeah. All right. So now I want to challenge you. I want to give you a very tough challenge. Right, you know what's coming here. I want to give you a very tough challenge. I need you to help
Hmm.
my viewers, right? Put all that knowledge. Gabe, how do we defeat the Tuchel roulette and the Pep shuffle? How do we defeat it? Last week, my team and I, we predicted all the midfielders that Pep would play, and they all started. Now that's a once in a, it's a shot in the dark. It worked out well, but how can we factor in this? Is there a way to use anything, any of your metrics, or what? How do you have any asset? Did you have any assets previously, and you got bitten by the Tuchel gambit and the Pep shuffle?
Yeah, I mean, it's happened to me countless times in the past, and Tuchel hasn't even been in the league that long, and
Right.
it's still he's burned us, right? So this is how I do it, and it has nothing to do with stats. I don't think if you're trying to beat it with stats, it's like trying to put out fire with fire.
Yeah.
It's like
It
you're
will beat
using the
you
same
instead.
things.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I think the way to do it is one, you plan by having players that don't tend to sub on.
Mm,
I say that with Reece James in my team, and he historically subs on. But I think this year is a little bit of a different year for Reece James.
correct.
I just think he's so important, and what he's doing is just impossible to ignore. But then, moreover, beyond that, after that planning, I would say just have a broader lens. So look at in 4 game weeks. If Reece James, for example, right, he scores 10, 15, 15, right? He's given you 40 points and then he's benched.
Mm,
Don't lament the time he's benched.
yeah. Yeah.
Factor that in with all the times he's hauled for you to create more of an average, and then just take it on the chin every once in a while that he's
Yeah.
benched. At least you're going to still be ahead because he's
Yeah.
the one of the best assets in the game. So just the shift in focus, I think will take care of the heartache.
And the Pep shuffle.
And the Pep shuffle, I mean, similarly, honestly, the Pep shuffle, I think the way to do it, and I guess right now Foden is an alternative, of course, because Ferran Torres is injured, right? But just go for a couple defenders,
Yeah.
and just stick, like don't mess with their forwards, unless it's Kevin De Bruyne. He has 3 good matchups coming up, but even I would even caution, don't fall for the double game weeks with these teams.
Yes. Yes.
Many of these players will not start both games, and they still might return. So when they don't, also don't get upset that they don't. I triple captained Gundogan last season in that double game week.
Right.
I only got him for one match, but it was enough.
Yeah.
So just don't lament the benchings. You know they're going to happen. Accept them. You knew they were going to happen when you got the players, and just know that overall you will come ahead in points.
Yeah. What we did, which is very stressful, we also pay attention to the Champions League games because, especially with Pep, that is a big factor with him deciding who plays on the weekend, and then again who they're facing on the weekend. Right? I thought I had the Tuchel shuffle down when I realized Chalobah was featuring when they played, let's say, the bottom 3 or the bottom 5, because that's what it looked like. But then he didn't do that last. So it's very, it was a bit tricky. But the problem, the reason I'm lamenting on the City, now the defenders, yes, but there are a lot of points just going away with the midfield game. They're making a lot of points. And it's very tough to guess, well, okay, time to get a City midfielder. You don't have him. And then sometimes if you have your, let's say, you have a Chelsea asset that didn't put, it was a defender instead. So you're losing out on that because of the whole, you don't know which City midfielder that is nailed in, really. The only one really is Foden, as you mentioned, probably Foden.
For now, yeah. But right now there are so many. Livramento is a great cheap option that can always come off the bench, although he should probably be starting by all rights now and on people's teams.
Correct.
And then Gallagher is another one, right? Rafinha, still, like we mentioned, is still cheap. And then who's the other? Oh, and Emil Smith Rowe, of course. I'm sure you'll endorse that pick.
Of course.
So these are all players that can come in, and you would feel fine about any one of those players coming in for your team, I think. Yeah. If a player does get benched.
And of course, like Gallagher. What's your feelings on Gallagher? Gallagher is a great asset going forward for you?
Prefer him to Smith Rowe.
Yeah. I agree. Hey, no, there's no heart in fantasy, Gabe. right? We
No,
want
no.
points, right?
We want points, not heart. It's a different game. Football is different than fantasy.
Exactly. All right. So, Gabe, thank you very much for coming on for this international break special. Thank you for breaking down the stats. I hope to have you and Marina on soon at another break, and we could maybe by then my knowledge would have improved, and I could do my own chat, and we could break down. Right.
That would be a lot of
Before
fun.
before you go, just give me all your handles where the guys can find you on YouTube, and of course all the articles. Just tell us where we can find you and all your information and knowledge.
Right. So I engage mostly through Twitter. I'm at FPLLENS on Twitter. We are on YouTube with our show. We have 2 shows a week. Although this week we'll just have one. It's the early week Compass show that talks about what the transfer trends are and what the price rises are, and Hibbo discusses how to kind of look for ways to break the template. That's kind of the focus of the Compass show, to get our bearings. And then the matchups show is later on in the week, usually about 48 hours before deadline. Both shows are live on YouTube. The chat in there is great. You can always jump in there, ask questions. And yeah, that's it. And then all my articles, of course, also posted on the bronze medal award-winning blog, all at FPL, all about FPL.com. One thing I will say, the gold and the gold and silver winners, those are paid sites where they have members and and all about FPL.com is totally free. We just contribute there. It's a great group effort. So I'm really proud to be a part of that project.
Yes, and once again, Gabe, thank you very much, guys. So don't forget, that whole show, FPLLENS, right? Don't be shy. And the FPL community on Twitter is really great, really welcoming.
Yeah.
Right? Really, really warm. And the spaces are great too. You can always check them out on OFB spaces, right? Normally, Gabe, you're coming in. You're regular now. Yeah.
I'm going to try to, that's got to keep happening. I got to get in there.
Yes. Right. So, Gabe, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for coming through, guys. As usual, please like, subscribe, share. We're doing really good on the subscriber count so far. Any questions you have for Gabe, put it down in the comments. I will pass on to him on Twitter and whatnot. And of course, guys, as usual, happy picking and green arrows for the weekend.